Hello and welcome back. It's so good to have you with us today. I have a wonderful guest with us today. His name is Todd Glider, and he is with MobiusPay. MobiusPay, he's the Chief CBDO, Chief Business Development Officer, little play on words there. But we've known Todd for many, many years. And he's recently joined MobiusPay. And when we heard the story of MobiusPay, we immediately latched on as a company at CannabisBPO because we realized the need in the cannabis industry space in general for someone like MobiusPay, because pretty much everybody I've ever talked to in this space has had an issue with Visa, MasterCard merchant services. And when Todd gave me an overview of how the industry is structured and how it works, it was a super aha moment for us. And I said, I want to become partners with you guys because every one of our clients needs your services without exception. So Todd, welcome to our podcast, and it's so good to have you with us, and it's so good to have you on as a partner of CannabisBPO.
Dan, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad to be here, and I can't tell you how appreciative I have been of, and our company has been, of MobiusPay has been, of how welcoming CannabisBPO has been, how welcoming you have been, how welcoming Marshall have been, and really the industry itself. I mean, this is really, really an exciting industry to be a part of. We're really excited about it. I mean, you can tell from the sound of my voice, obviously. We're really just glad to be providing a service that we really do think that the industry really does need, and is going to help an awful lot of companies out there, grow and get to the next level.
Well, I mean, it really is. I mean, we're all waiting for safe banking. That's kind of the next level. And so THC touching companies will be able to process Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express transactions. We're not there yet. There's all kinds of workarounds. You go to any trade show and there's all kinds of ways to do it, ATM cards, whatever it might be. But there's a whole other space out there that's much larger, when people that don't touch the plant, people that might be an advertising agency or someone like us. We don't have Visa, MasterCard merchant services ourselves, but the word cannabis will trigger all kinds of stuff. And I never quite understood what was happening when a client would call me in a panic and say, hey, I got shut off, not for a day, not for a week, but we're talking for weeks and months at a time that they went without merchant services and having to resort to checks and PayPal. So help our audience understand the structure of our payment processing system to help explain how and why this happens.
Sure thing. Well, essentially what occurs in this space, particularly when you're talking about businesses that are not touching the plant. And by that, we mean like businesses that are in the hydroponics or in lights or like training and educating. You would think that any of these businesses would have no problem accepting credit cards. And most of these businesses are therefore going to approach somebody like Stripe or PayPal or Square, one of these payment service providers that are aggregators. They're not merchant account providers. They don't provide individual businesses with their own merchant account. They say, hop on board. You can be on our merchant account. That's what PayPal, Stripe, and Square and the like do. They have a merchant account and they allow multiple merchants to hop on board. Now, what will often happen with folks that are in the cannabis space, who are, again, not even touching the plant, is they get a processing account with one of these entities. They start processing. On their website, they're mentioning cannabis. There's using industry jargon like cannabis or THC or marijuana, any of these words that are, there for marketing purposes. There again, just to communicate to the market they're trying to sell to. Well, that's all fine and good for the market they're selling to, but from the bank's perspective, who are always running in algorithms, there are algorithms that are running in the background. I mean, everybody hears the word algorithm all the time associated with Facebook and all of these social media platforms. But the banks are doing the same thing. And in a bank's algorithm, these are not the most genius algorithm. This is not Judgment Day Terminator movie. These are very, very dumb and simple algorithms. And these algorithms go through a website. They crawl every website that's in their system that's processing for them. And when they see a word like cannabis, a red flag goes up. And when that red flag goes up, the processing goes down. And the company is in a panic. Obviously, this is an existential crisis for a company if suddenly you can't accept payment. You can't accept Visa or MasterCard payment because you certainly still have bills coming in. But if you can't make any money, it's a great big problem. So that's one part of the issue. So that's the payment service provider problem. And that is the big trap that a huge number of businesses get into because they assume, hey, I'm not touching the plant. I should be able to use get a Square account. I should be able to get a Stripe account, a PayPal account. And that is true, but only half true for the reason I just told you. The other side of it is the people who are just like, hey, I want my own merchant account. So somebody says that they approach a company that offers merchant accounts, a financial services organization, and they say, hey, I could use a merchant account. And that merchant account provider says, no problem, you got it. However, they don't tell the acquiring bank. And financial service organizations, they work with banks and they connect merchants with the banks. But the banks that they're connecting a lot of these merchants with are not necessarily aware of what kind of business they're in. They'll hide it a little bit because the financial service organization, by any means necessary, wants to get you that merchant account. And they're going to cut corners to do it. And often these financial services organizations, they're not really organizations. It's just like one person. They're like guns for hire who are out there who are called in the industry jargon, in banking jargon, in payments jargon, agents. And an agent can just be one person who happens to have a relationship with some larger organization. And anytime they connect any business to that bank, they get paid in perpetuity, a percentage of every sale. So it is in their interest to board people no matter what. And they often will cut corners. And what happens in the end is that these folks who really went out of their way to get their own merchant account. They said, I want to control my own destiny. I want to have my own merchant account. I don't want to be at the whims of a huge organization like Square or whatever. They went and got their merchant accounts only to find out that the company that connected them to the bank did not tell the bank what kind of business it was. And then the bank suddenly...
That's what attracted us to MobiusPay is your unique value prop is that you're not an agent, that you have direct relationships with banks. So when you sign up with MobiusPay, you're actually going directly to the bank, or as about direct to the bank as you can get in this business, I would suspect.
That's correct. And of course we have the direct relationship. Direct relationship is really, really important because whenever there is an issue, there's always going to be an issue with processing once in a while. It's the lifeblood of your business. As I've said before, the banking industry at its most basic structure has not changed very, very much since the advent of the internet. Consequently, there's always going to be once in a while, there's going to be an issue with processing. With MobiusPay, every bank that we're going to connect you with as somebody in the cannabis business, we have a direct relationship with. So in the event that there's ever an issue and you tell us, hey, I'm having a problem here, well, we have a direct line to the bank and we can say, hey, this partner of ours is having a problem. Let's get this fixed up. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that Mobius, any bank that we're going to connect anybody in this space to, that bank welcomes that business. That bank knows exactly what this cannabis related business does. It's not going to be, we're not trying to slide it into their portfolio without them seeing it. We're not telling them, these folks, they sell Formica furniture and they're not in anything close to anything related to cannabis in any way whatsoever.
When you highlighted this, what was going on and helping me really educate me on the business, I started paying close attention to my receipts when I'd buy certain products from certain vendors. And I started seeing a pattern. And the pattern is they're all inaccurate, or a better way to say it is they're lying. Because they can't actually say what it is, because if they said what it was, they would get shut down, even though it doesn't touch the plant.
That's right. They're miscoded. It's the word for it is miscoded. Okay. And yeah, they are all miscoded. And here's the real problem for these companies that board with some of these the unscrupulous merchant account providers, is that not only do they get shut down, and of course that is an existential crisis. If people can't pay you, I mean, reputationally it's horrible, and it's also just in terms of concrete dollars coming into your pocket, the money's not coming anymore. So it is an enormously difficult thing to deal with. But the big thing about it is that the companies aren't aren't being told what what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong. It just happens. It happens completely suddenly, and nobody is able to get an answer, because often when this happens, whoever boarded them their merchant account, they disappear. They're gone. They're gone in 10 seconds, and that's that. Yeah.
Help me understand, as someone who's in the business, and again, we don't need merchant services, but I've obviously have pretty much all of our clients have a need for merchant services at some point. One of the things that you say is you should have multiple merchant accounts, and help me understand that
Right.
kind of thinking, and help me understand how that works and how mechanically how that works.
Sure, sure. Well, again, it's all about redundancy, and one of the examples that I always say is our home office is in Florida. So like, the line that I use a lot of the time, it's like, if you don't have redundancy in processing, if you don't have a backup, it's like living in Hurricane Alley without a generator.
Right.
It's just, you need that kind of backup, because at any given moment, a bank's processing can have a hiccup. These things occur. They occur not all the time, but it's really for peace of mind. It's driving without a seatbelt. It's not having backup. And again, if something as crucial as processing, to not have a backup, it's really, you're taking a lot higher risk than you need to. And it's really about that risk mitigation. It circles back to what I was talking about with some of these payment service providers like Square, like Stripe, is that all of these companies, I always say to people, I'm not here to suggest that you get rid of anybody. I'm just saying that you need a second solution. On any given day, the banks that you are working with, whether you're working with Stripe or whether you've got your own merchant accounts, they often panic. I mean, one of the things that is really important to point out is, we're always talking about like Facebook being too big or Amazon being too big, and they are. I'm not disagreeing that they're not, but we don't hear a lot about how big Visa and MasterCard are. And these guys are gigantic. They make the banks, and the biggest banks in the world, mind you, quiver. I mean, when you look at the way banks look at Visa and MasterCard, it's like they're all Chicken Little looking up at the sky. That's the way the complexion of it is. And the bottom line is that when Visa or MasterCard releases some kind of an update or some kind of a change in their system, that all gets sent to the banks. And when that gets sent to the banks start running around like Chicken Little. They start freaking out, and they're like, "Oh, we got to do something. Have we looked at our high-risk merchants?" And anybody that is in this space is going to be looked at as a high-risk merchant, even if they're not, even if they're not touching the plants. In this space, CBD is high-risk merchant. That really is a high-risk merchant. If you're not touching the plant, you really shouldn't be considered a high-risk merchant, but you still may very well be viewed that way. And the bottom line is that when the banks start getting scared by some update from Visa or MasterCard, the first place they look to say, "Oh, we should get rid of some of the merchant accounts," is those businesses in their portfolio. And in the event that a bank does that, because that happens with Square and the like a lot, you need something backup to come right in, because if you've got a backup, your clients aren't going to notice.
Right.
That transaction is just going to cascade down to the next step. It'll go through properly. Nobody's going to know it, and it's going to all be resolved without any impact on your business.
You work at MobiusPay. You work with multiple banks.
Yeah, of course.
Can you set up redundant accounts with multiple banks on behalf of clients in this industry?
Most definitely. Okay. Most definitely. I mean, and again, that really is the whole thing. It's like the banks that we work with are completely at ease with the kind of business that's being boarded with them. I mean, we're completely forthright. We tell them exactly this is the kind of business it is. And of course, you certainly have the opportunity to have multiple banks, multiple accounts, and multiple banks. So the event that one of them goes down for a minute, it doesn't affect another one. So again, we can set up redundancy that way very, very easily.
There's multiple ways to have redundancy, either built in or outside. But that was one of the things that fascinated me about about this industry as well, is how much money is flowing through, and how many middlemen there are. It's amazing how many middlemen there are in this business. And
Sure.
you see an agent is an agent of an agent of an agent. It's almost like a multi-level in many ways.
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing about MobiusPay is your relationships are directly with the banks. There's no more middlemen.
Well, right. Well, and that middleman is, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's always and like I dedicate a whole slide to this, in the presentation when we're talking to people about what MobiusPay offers versus other merchant financial services organizations, because there's a million financial services organizations. Everybody's been approached by a merchant account provider, and not everybody has a horrible time with them. But the difference is with MobiusPay, in the example of that agent relationship, is that, first of all, there are often agents related to agents who have the connection to the bank. This is all very normal. It sounds like multi-level marketing. It sounds like some kind of a scheme, but no, this is business. This is payment services. It's just completely normal. And the way it works is, I might have a direct relationship with a bank, and there might be a colleague who's like, "Hey, I want to be in payment services too. Was there anything I can do to help?" I'm like, "Yeah, if you can connect us to somebody who is interested into a merchant account, well, we'll give you a finder's fee." And they're like, "Great, thanks." And they start growing a little bit, and then somebody says to them, "Hey, buddy, how are you making money?" It's like, "Hey, I got a financial, I'm like a financial services organization." Like, really, can I get into that? And they're like, "Yeah, you know what? Why don't you refer people to me, and I'll give you a cut, and I'll give you a finder's fee."
Very reminiscent of the old long distance business as well.
Yeah.
And back then it was expensive at 17 cents a minute. I'm old enough to remember that. There was enough room at 17 cents a minute to pay a lot of commissions to people.
For sure. Well, and it's totally, again, this is all above board. There's nothing untoward about this. The problem only comes up when the merchant who thinks he got his merchant account from somebody who has a relationship with a bank is 3 or 4 people removed. And so the only view that merchant has is the person that got on the merchant account. So when there's a problem, that agent speaks to the agent that they work for, and eventually gets to the bank. And we've all played the telephone game before. And that's what happens when the merchant has an issue. So it makes the process of getting issues resolved protracted. It and often creates more confusion. So that's, again, the importance of having the direct relationships.
Help us understand the fee structure, because there's so many fees and little things put in, and by the time you add them up, sometimes it can be very deceptive. Once you get the interchange fee and this fee and that fee, and all of a sudden you add it up, it's like, well, that's not what I thought it was. It's actually a lot more. So help us understand the fee structure of generally how the industry works, and help us understand the pieces and what we should be looking at as a consumer of these services.
Well, you want to look at your discount rate. The discount rate is basically the basic percentage that you're going to be paying for every transaction. And this is a much, much, much bigger conversation. In fact, what I would encourage any company out there to do, and this is something that we're particularly offering for free to anybody who mentions CannabisBPO, is that if you contact us and you say, "Hey, will you review our statements?" We'll give you a comprehensive analysis of your processing statement for nothing, no obligation at all, just to tell you where your money's going and how hopefully we could obviously save you money. But even if we can't, we're going to tell you, we're going to break it all down for you. But your discount rate is the percentage that basically is going to, what percentage of every dollar is going to be withdrawn automatically. But understand that discount rates are variable, because it depends on how quote good the transaction is considered by the card scheme and everybody along the way. Because there's high grade, mid grade, low grade transactions, and it's all based on weird things. Like, if your credit card is a corporate card, your rate is going to be higher. You're going to probably pay more than the mid rate. If you're coming and you're handing over your card, if it's a point of sale transaction, if you're in a brick and mortar store, that's a much better rate than a card not present transaction automatically. And it depends on the actually even the ticket amount. Like if the ticket amount is thousands of dollars, the discount rate is going to go up. So it's not a static rate. It's not static. And the other thing on top of it is transaction fees. You know, you're going to pay, we're going to pay, generally it's a flat fee per transaction. I don't know, it might be $1, it might be 30 cents. And these are numbers I'm just throwing out there, but it's just a flat fee on top of that. I mean, all of this circles back to the notion that the banking system has not evolved very much, because when you're talking about a payment in a credit card, there's a billion hands out. Right. When it goes from you entering your credit card numbers in to the merchant sending you whatever product you're paying for. So there's a million little things, interchange fees. There's all kinds of fees along the way. There's also fees that are certainly very, very important ones that you want, because there's a gateway fee, for example. Generally speaking, we use a gateway, and one of the things that gateways offer are chargeback protections. A scrub is in place to ensure that unscrupulous transactions are not going through. This is a whole other nuance that's very interesting, is the concept of fraud scrubbing. Fraud scrubbing is the idea that, you know, if a credit card that is stolen is hopefully not going to signal a successful transaction. This is a really important thing, because you would think that if a credit card is active, well, then it's active, that it's good, but that doesn't mean anything. You could right now hop online, and in 5 minutes, you don't even have to go to the dark web. You can find hundreds of thousands of credit card numbers that are still active but stolen. It's just they haven't been reported stolen yet. So if you don't have a fraud scrub in place, you know, for your credit card processing, any scammer out there could get a hold of a bunch of these credit cards. They can start running transactions. As soon as it's gonna process successfully. If you don't have a scrub in place, it's gonna say, yeah, no problem, the card is working. So it's gonna come back, you're gonna get the money, you're gonna send out your products in 2 weeks. As all of those owners of the credit card start reporting their cards being stolen, all of that money is going to be taken back from you, and all of those transactions are going to result in chargebacks, which means that you're going to get an extra $30 or so charge on every single one of those. So you're out your product, you're out your money, and you've been penalized for it. So I'm going kind of off the topic a little bit there, but it's an important part of the whole, where is my money going with processing, and it is that, and this also, if I can continue on that, circles back to, again, I was talking about Square and Stripe, and well, there's another side to that, and you can apply too much of a fraud scrub. You can be overly conservative with your fraud scrubbing to the point that legitimate transactions are being rejected. Right. You don't want that, but you will get a lot of that with some of these larger payment service providers. Why? Because they are much more concerned about preserving their merchant account than they are your business succeeding, for obvious reasons, you know. Yeah. So
interesting. So yeah, it's really making sure that interests are aligned is really the takeaway story that I hear. And in most cases, these third-party processors that people go to aren't necessarily aligned with your business interest. And that's the bottom line. That's again, I've been in this space long enough to remember the challenges of credit cards in the old days, when when you see the ads on TV for pocket fishermen. That's how I started in this business. And card present was the riskiest kind of merchant services there were. It was the hardest thing to come by. Now anybody can really get a merchant account, but as you pointed out, business hasn't really changed that much.
No. And I'll tell you honestly, my trip to getting to cannabis, to like getting in the cannabis space, you know, there's some pop cultural pieces to it. Like, for example, I think one of the things that got me excited about cannabis, and this sounds so inane, but the last scene of the very last episode, do you remember the show Weeds? Yeah. Do you remember that TV show? Well, there was the last scene in that show is this kind of heavenly moment with like Choral Oz playing and a great big sunny projection on this fast food restaurant kind of atmosphere where people were buying weed, you know, over the counter. And then when I saw that, now that was only 10 years ago. When I saw that, I was like, that can never happen. Never. I was like, that looks like so far-fetched. And it's like, and here we are, you know. Yeah. So I was shocked by that. And then the other thing for me was just, I feel like the legalization of cannabis is a 100-year event in the same way the pandemic was a 100-year event, but that the cannabis side is the Jekyll to the pandemic Hyde. And I really felt like, wow, I really want to be a part of that. And the reason I even mention all that is because when MobiusPay said, hey, we really want to diversify, we want to get into the cannabis business, do you want to be part of that solution? I was like, absolutely, because I'm somebody who was a merchant who acquired merchant accounts a lot longer than I've been somebody who's been offering merchant accounts now. That's new, but for many, many years, that was my business, online merchant. And MobiusPay always picked up the phone. MobiusPay always was there, and MobiusPay always knew what was going on at Visa and MasterCard too. Because I was saying a little bit earlier about Visa and MasterCard, like, they'll hand down this new rule, and it's like, it's like the 10 Commandments coming down, and everybody gets scared. They always, not only did they know what Visa and MasterCard were talking about, they knew how the banks were going to react. So I always knew my merchant accounts were in good shape. So again, that was really what got me into it. And that, again, that's why, like, it's say, yeah, of course, everybody, you can get a merchant account from anybody, but you really want to be with somebody that you can trust, that knows the business, that understands high risk processing, because a high risk business, and when I say high risk, it's deemed high risk by the card schemes. They're handled very differently by the banks. They're looked at very differently. So somebody who says that a low risk merchant account is somehow the same as high risk and handled the same way, they don't know high risk merchant accounts.
Right. And they're going to get shut down.
Okay. They are. They're going to run into some problems. It's just unfortunate, but it's true. Yeah.
Well, Todd, thank you so much. We're running out of time, and I could hear you. My first education with you was truly an education, and I've been in the space a long time. So I was really, I learned a ton from what you have to offer, and I can't recommend your services enough. And I encourage anybody who wants to have someone look at their merchant services transactions to give them a full analysis and get back to, and Todd would be happy to do that for you. So Todd, thank you for joining us today, and have a great week.
Thank you so much, Dan, and thank you, CannabisBPO, and you have a great rest of your week as well.